Welcome to the weekly discussion of how the technology of today impacts the world of tomorrow. This is the Fill in the Blank podcast, and I'm Ross Strader, joined by my co-host Keith Abels. And you can follow us on Twitter at AskFITB or email us fitbpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to know that you're listening and what you think about the Fill in the Blank podcast. All right, Keith, here we are, Fill in the Blank, episode 29, and we do have a few news topics to talk about. And here's how we're going to do it today. This is our format. We've got 3 topics. We're going to set a timer for 10 minutes each, and we'll talk about as much as we can on each subject in those 10 minutes. But I'll go ahead and preview what the 3 are. That even allows the listener, if you're listening, you can just fast forward 10 minutes if you want, go to the next topic. So the first one, we're going to talk about Happy Amazon Prime Day. The second one, we're going to talk about the new MacBook Pro that dropped quietly from Apple. And then we're going to talk about the new Microsoft Surface Go. So Keith, before we do that, how you doing tonight?
I'm good. I'll say this, that you said people might want to skip. Nobody's going to skip.
Well, no.
They're going to listen to it all the way through, including our little mid-show Patreon ad that we put in there. So nobody's going to skip 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's true. I shouldn't have even said it, but, just trying to make a point. I was just trying to make a point. That's all.
I understand. Thanks for listening to the Fill in the Blank podcast. We hope you're enjoying the show. We encourage all of our listeners to support us at patreon.com/FITB. Patreon allows you to support our show completely on your terms, whether it's $1 an episode, $1 a month, or $10 a year. You get to decide. To support the show, simply go to patreon.com/FITB to make your contribution. Thank you so much for listening to the Fill in the Blank podcast, and now back to the show.
So if you'll hit the timer, we'll start with the Happy Amazon Prime Day.
All right, timer has been activated. Go.
All right, so Amazon Prime, there was a slight delay. Well, it started, and then it stopped, and then it had to restart. And then Amazon ended up extending it. But before we get into that, any Prime purchases for you on the Amazon Prime Day?
I did not. I was very intentional about not getting sucked in to some of these deals. So I think what people do is they, like a lot of sales anyway, they come across something that is a really good deal and they just buy it because the deal's so good.
Yeah.
Not necessarily because they need it.
Right. Well, I've heard of people doing that. Yeah.
Well, I've been guilty of that myself too. I'm not judging. I'm just saying that's a thing that exists. And as you know, and hopefully our listeners that have listened to us for a while, one of the things that I like to do and I implement just personally is I am trying not to accumulate a bunch of stuff that I don't need. And I am try to be very intentional with the things that I purchase. And those are things that I need and that I will get value out of and will enjoy. And so something like Amazon Prime Day, especially with a lot of techie stuff, I know my weaknesses, Ross. Yeah. So I was not necessarily glued to all the sites that are doing the best Amazon Prime deals. Now, there's a lot of great deals out there, don't get me wrong. And there's a lot of great deals on stuff people need and want.
Yeah.
For me this year, I decided to kind of sit it out and just observe from the sidelines. How about you?
Well, so my experience, I don't think I have ever bought anything on Amazon Prime Day. Now, the things I do end up buying on Amazon, my impulse Amazons are usually the flash sales that come through. So right. Not often do I do that, but every now and then something will come across on a flash sale, or particularly if I've dropped something in my waiting cart, and then it pops up on a flash sale. So sometimes I'll buy on a flash sale on impulse, but typically not. Typically, it's something I go and I'm looking for and I'm shopping around. And I find on Amazon, you can search for one thing and find several different prices on it. It seems like right. I bought a pair of shoes a few weeks ago to go on a trip. And, the one that came up was one price. And then I found that it was listed like 3 or 4 other times, the same exact shoe through Amazon. So, you have to kind of navigate that. I did get on and look at the Amazon Prime Day, though. And I will tell you my experience, just, pulling up the website, I was turned off because it looked like I was going to have to wade through a whole bunch of junk. And so I didn't have anything I was looking for, and nothing immediately caught my eye, and it just looked like a whole bunch. It looked a little bit like Amazon's garage sale to me. That's just me, though, just me.
Yeah, well, it's very much like Black Friday.
Yeah.
Where, they do these crazy deals, and there's a lot of people that on Black Friday, like they get up super early. I'm not one of those people, but they get up super early, and they're going through the ads in the paper, and they kind of make this plan. And they're going to go to this store and get this thing, then they're going to send their cousin to this store and get this thing, and then they're going to go over this, and they have this whole kind of game plan, and they've scoured all the deals, and have made their little plan of attack for all these Black Friday sales. I think a lot of people are probably just using different sites to kind of uncover some of the best deals.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about one of those sites in just a minute. I don't know how you couldn't use something like that, because you'd almost have to, because you're right, there are so many things on Amazon. And normally, like you said with the shoes, you type in something that you're looking for, and at least that is an effective filter to give you a pretty relevant list of things that either match that or are similar to whatever it is that you put in.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can kind of, when you click on one, it kind of gives you reviews, and then other people that looked at this bought these things. And so, that stuff all works well. But that's all coming from the premise or from the standpoint that you know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And so if you're there just kind of browsing or window shopping, then you do have to just wade through a bunch of stuff. Now, in the end, apparently people didn't have any trouble finding anything, because Amazon said this was the biggest shopping event ever, with 100 million products sold. I'm looking at an article here from CNBC, and they said this was the biggest Prime Day yet. Actually, it was its biggest shopping event yet. So this would actually beat, prior holiday seasons, prior Prime Days, and shoppers purchased more than 100 million products.
It's just mind-boggling to me. It's mind-boggling.
What do you think the best-selling things were?
Well, so I don't know. Maybe off the top of my head, I would say people bought a bunch of tech stuff, but maybe that's not right. I don't know.
No, they did. So according to CNBC, the best-selling products included the Fire Stick TV,
okay,
which is an Amazon product,
yeah,
a techie product, so you're right, and then also the Echo Dot, which is the least expensive Amazon Echo. So clearly, Amazon's products are front and center in Prime on Prime Day.
It is, and isn't that interesting? So just, was it a month ago, 6 weeks ago, we talked about on this podcast, Amazon's Echo and, all those devices that run Alexa. They were recording conversations. There's been all of these things about how you can find out what is recorded. You can delete the history of it. And even with that has not creeped people out. It still becomes on Amazon Prime Day, the biggest shopping event they've ever had, one of the most sold items in the event.
I don't think most people are terribly concerned about privacy. I just don't.
Yeah.
And, a good deal will trump anything.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, I think just psychologically, the price of something, that aggressive price point, I think is enough to convince most people that they're just going to jump on it. So I don't know that privacy is a concern. The other part of this is things like Prime Day and Black Friday and just sales in general. It's a very emotional thing for people. That people make emotional decisions. I don't think they make a lot of logical decisions. So, when you see something that's 50% off, then you think, oh, I'm going to get that half off. Well, I could get two of them. It's like buying one.
Right.
Instead of like stopping and thinking what the actual dollar amount is for the products you're getting. So there's a lot of psychology at play here. And of course, Amazon knows how to use that to their advantage. But I don't know the numbers. I don't know that Amazon would release numbers. But if you consider that, Amazon is the biggest retailer on the planet, this was their biggest day, and they put their products, so whether it's, Kindle Fire tablets or their line of Echoes or Fire TVs or whatever, any of that stuff, they're going to sell the heck out of that stuff.
And they totally recovered from the crash. So was it a server crash? Do you know any details? Why?
I don't
know
that there's a lot of details, but see, here's what's weird about that. Amazon powers half the internet.
Yeah.
With AWS. So I don't know if this was an internal... I find it hard to believe this is an internal issue. It very well could be. In the article that on CNBC, it says a series of glitches on Amazon's website Monday around 3 p.m. Eastern Time stalled many users. I wouldn't be surprised if there was some sort of attack on Amazon and they're just not reporting it.
Sure.
Because, that's what they do. A big chunk of their business is powering the internet through Amazon Web Services. So, If it was, it's not a very good endorsement for how they handle heavy traffic. If it wasn't, then I don't know that we'll ever know. But if we're going to find out, we've got a minute and a half because that's what's left on our 10-minute timer.
Well, I just think it's interesting, and who knows? I mean, they recovered, they extended it to 36 hours, and so that may be some of the reason that was the biggest shopping event they've ever had, because it actually lasted longer than they had anticipated, or maybe that generated some extra publicity, extra news. People then got on, and I mean, who knows how all of that happened. And probably some Harvard business student will write a paper on it, and we'll be able to read it in a couple of years.
Well, if you're interested in what the best deals were, there's a great site, Thrifter. So thrifter.com. They do in real time, as Prime Day is unfolding, they do these real time updates on, are these good deals or not. So they research the heck out of each of these things, especially the flash sale items, and they research the history of them as far as the pricing history to let you know if this is a very good deal or not. So if you missed out and wanted to know what some of the good deals were, thrifter.com. Or I'm sure just wait for another month or two, or even the holidays, and Amazon is going to be very aggressive with all those same things again. And Ross, we are out of time on this topic. It is time to move on.
We'd talked a couple of weeks ago, or a month ago, there was the WWDC. Apple comes out. They announce new software that's about to happen. There was some rumors leading up to it that there might be some hardware announcement that got squelched a couple of days before. Everybody knew, hey, this is just going to be about software. And then quietly, here a month and a half later, Apple, with no fanfare or anything, just rolls out a new iteration of the MacBook Pro with some serious hardware upgrades. And what, the news that's come out over the last couple of days is that they've actually fixed the keyboard problem. One, they made it quieter, but in making it quieter, they also protected the underneath keyboard. So the issue was there was dust, the particles getting inside people's keyboards. It was affecting, making sure, it was preventing certain keys from working on certain keyboards, and people were having to have those fixed. And it appears as though in all of this, they not only upgraded their processors and their RAM and all of that, they also fixed the keyboard.
Yeah, of course, they can't say that they fixed the keyboard, because that would mean they'd have to admit that there's something wrong with the keyboard.
Right.
And they can't really do that because they're being sued by tons of people.
Oh, yeah.
They've got multiple class actions going on. So there's no way that they're going to say they fixed the keyboard. They did. I think that's why they said they made it quieter. But that's just a guess. So here's what they did. They updated the 13 and 15-inch MacBook Pros. Now, not all of them, just the ones with touch bars. And so remember, those were the higher-end MacBook Pros already.
Right.
So 13-inch and 15-inch MacBook Pros with touch bar got updated. The 15-inch got a pretty healthy update. We'll put a link in the show notes to an article from The Verge that gives you a nice rundown. But the 15-inch goes all the way up now to an i9 processor. So previously you would max out the Intel Core i7 processor on your 13 or 15-inch MacBook Pro, but on the 15-inch for this update you go all the way up to an i9, which can give you boost up to like 4.8 gigahertz. That's remarkable. Really nice updates on processors for both of these.
Oh yeah.
Good updates on just total storage. The 13-inch can go all the way up to a 2 terabyte SSD, and the 15-inch can go all the way up to a 4 terabyte SSD. Ross, do you have any idea how much the 4 terabyte SSD costs just by itself when you add it to the 15-inch MacBook Pro?
I do not. I have no idea how much 4 terabytes.
$3,200.
Oh my gosh.
That one component is $3,200. So if somebody were to go build a 15-inch MacBook Pro, the new version, and max it out, you have any idea what that would cost? So max out processor, max out RAM, which the max RAM is 32 gigs of DDR4 RAM. I don't know. I think the video card is the same across the lineup, at least for the 13. They all the 13s share the same video card. All the 15s share the same video card, but they're different video cards.
Okay.
So you can max out the processor, max out the RAM, max out the hard drive. If you were to do that on a 15-inch MacBook Pro, how much would you guess that is?
My guess is it's going to be over $5,000.
You are correct. It is $6,700.
Oh my gosh.
It starts at $2,399. So the 15-inch MacBook Pro starts at $2,399, maxed out $6,700.
That's just nuts. Well, for one, so I did hear they upgraded to the 8th generation i7, i9. And that was part of the scandal the last time they released their MacBook Pros, because 8th generation was available, but they did not go 8th generation. It was not the very best processor that Apple could have put in at the time. So it may have been when they started the design, or they'd already contracted for it, or whatever. But this is a pretty big leap. So 8th generation up to i9 Intel processor, that's a screaming fast.
Yeah, these are really good power updates for sure. So if you held out on the last couple of generations of MacBook Pros because you didn't feel like they were a good enough value, I think you're getting closer here. Let's talk about this keyboard for just a minute. So they mentioned it's quieter. And so it's still that funky butterfly keyboard that has the very low travel on it.
Yeah.
Which I didn't mind typing on necessarily. I still prefer the older keyboards.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily a deal breaker for me, the short travel in the newer MacBook Pros on the keyboards. But I think we talked about this on the show. When I was shopping for a new computer, I was, in the Apple Store and at Best Buy, and I was just kind of typing away at these things in these different environments. And the clickety-clack of that keyboard on the newer MacBook Pros was just driving me crazy. It was so loud. And so obviously it's not just me, because they're mentioning a quieter keyboard. So they put this little silicone little component around each of the keys, underneath each of the keys.
Yeah, it's like a little sleeve, right?
It's like a little dampening kind of thing as you push down on it. So I have no doubt that makes the keyboard quieter, because it's going, as you press the key, then it's going down on this kind of softer kind of noise, not canceling, but kind of noise reducing, noise dampening little silicone thing that wraps around underneath the key. However, I think the main reason for that, Ross, is that's that little silicone little thing around each of the bottom of the keys. I think that's what's keeping out all the dirt and the dust and all that. I think that's the primary purpose for that, and not the quiet thing. I think the quiet thing is a nice little positive side effect of having to build this little silicone little crumb tray, or whatever you want to call it, to keep all the junk out and prevent all these keyboard failures like you have on yours.
I know my N key does not work. It's so frustrating. Well, it does, but you just have to bang really hard on it, and it's I'm super frustrated with it.
So I think that's their motivation, honestly, is keeping or making more reliable keyboards, which is good. It just so happens that they're quieter. But they can't say, we fixed it. They have to say they're quieter. So I think that's their little code for wink, wink, we fixed the keyboard. One other thing to mention, these also now support Hey Siri. If your iPhone just went off like mine did, I apologize. So both the 13-inch and the 15-inch MacBook Pros with the Touch Bar, the newer ones, will support the Hey You-Know-Who on there, because they've got that special little chip in there they call the T2, which powers the Touch Bar and also has that kind of always-on listening for that particular trigger phrase.
Right.
So that will work, which, if you're used to using that, that's a nice feature to have. I don't use that particular search or you-know-who very often because, well, my feelings about Siri, but it is getting better. And I don't know what Siri shortcuts mean in a MacBook Pro.
Yeah.
We certainly know what they mean in iOS 12. So if there is some functionality that carries over to a MacBook Pro, then, that could be worth looking at. All right, so we've got basically a minute and a half. Let me ask you this question, Ross. I've heard this from a couple of different people this week and also read it. I read it. I didn't see it on Reddit.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So a theory floating around out there on the interweb is that we've been talking about for a while, is it, are we going to replace all the Macs with iOS, or what's going on here? So here's the theory. Apple is keeping Mac hardware around and pushing it towards the higher end for pro use, and iOS kind of becomes the everyman or consumer device. You have a minute to tell me if you agree or disagree with that.
Well, I do. Well, so I do. I think it's probably 2 iterations away, and the reason is because I think that 12-inch MacBook that they have is really sleek. I think it is going to meet a need that's bigger than an iPad Pro, but I wouldn't be surprised if it goes the way of the MacBook Air, where it just sort of stays out there, there's no update for a long time, and then finally just sort of gets retired into the sunset. But I have a feeling you'll see a couple of more iterations of the MacBook Pro and maybe one more iOS upgrade until they're fully in that place. But even functionally right now, as people are looking at new computers, I think a lot of people are going to be looking at iPads to replace computers for the things they do. They watch Netflix, they check email, they check Twitter. If Instagram ever came out with an iPad app, which to my knowledge they don't, I'm not on Instagram very much, but it's one of those holdouts. It doesn't have sort of iPad. It's not iPad friendly. But I think for what most people do, even simple word processing and spreadsheets and stuff like that, your iPad Pro is going to be the way to go, or even just the smaller iPad or the cheaper iPad that also has pencil capability. So, yes, I think so.
All right. Well, it doesn't matter if I agree or disagree with that because I'm out of time and cannot voice my opinion. So, let's move on to the next topic, shall we?
Yes, let's do. All right. So, Microsoft Surface. So let me say this. Microsoft has introduced one more product into their hardware line. So they've got the desktop, the big fancy desktop with the spin wheel that I think is super cool. I have no application for it in my life, but I do think that's pretty cool. So you got the big desktop, then you've got their Surface Book, I think is what they call it, which many of the reviews say, man, as far as a laptop goes, that's one of the best laptops that's ever been made. It has fantastic reviews. It's super light. Then you go from the Surface Book to the Surface Pro, which is the one like you see on the nightly news that has a little kickstand and the little detachable, soft keyboard kind of a deal that looks a little bit like Apple's smart keyboard for their iPad Pros. But now they've introduced one more product into that line, the new Microsoft Surface Go. So Keith, Go. Tell us about that.
All right, so this fits into a price point that Microsoft, with their own hardware, has not attacked yet. And so this thing starts off at $399. It's very much like the iPad in the fact that they sell you just I think this is a 10-inch device. They sell you that, and then you can buy a pen and keyboard separately if you want to. So it starts at $399, and if you wanted to add on the pen and the keyboard, I think they're about $100 each. So this is a smaller version than the Surface Pro. The same form factor where they've got the little kickstand. It's just smaller all the way around. Same type of keyboard. I really like the keyboards on the Surface Pros because they're more traditional clicky-clacky keys than what you see on the iPad keyboard from Apple. That's kind of squishy.
Well, and it has a mouse. I mean, it has the
and it
mouse.
has the trackpad. Yeah. So this runs a version of Windows 10. So it's Windows 10 S mode, which is their kind of basic mode, and you can upgrade that to Windows 10 Home if you want to for free. So it will run a full version of Windows. And then so this is basically, it's kind of, I was trying to think, is this an iPad play? Is this a cheap, kind of low-end laptop play? Is this a Chromebook play? I've kind of settled on, Ross, I think this is a way for Microsoft to position a device against both the iPad consumer and the Chromebook consumer.
Yeah.
So at $399 starting off, and you could go to $499 with a keyboard. So let's say $500 with a keyboard. That's really nice Chromebook territory. So you can get a good Chromebook for about $300. You can get a really nice Chromebook for around $500 or $600, or you can go all out and get the Google Pixel for anywhere between $800 and $1,000, depending on if you catch it on sale or not. But this pushes a really good piece of hardware down to a pretty affordable price point. And whether you're a Windows person or not, and by the way, the majority of the world is still on Windows, for those that are using computers, then this gives you a really good piece of hardware. Microsoft's making great hardware. Their laptops are really nice. The Surface Pro is really nice, the desktop that you were referring to. They're making really good hardware, so I don't really have a doubt that this will be a good piece of hardware. It will run, most things that you can run on Windows. It's probably not going to have a ton of power. This is not the one that you would get, if you are a professional, which I don't think anybody would be surprised by that. It's running, guess what kind of processor this thing's running?
Well, I was going to ask you about that. So is it a decent processor? I mean, what do you know about it?
Well, I don't know. All I know is it's called the Pentium Gold, and I've not heard the Pentium name used in reference to processors or anything for that matter in a very long time. So it says that this is more than twice as powerful as the Surface 3 that came out a few years ago. So but they don't really tell you. I don't know what that actually means.
Right.
It's a 1.6 gigahertz fanless chip. So not bad for what it is. I don't know how that compares. Well, I mean, so here's the thing. You can look at that number and compare it to, say, the Core M processor that's inside the MacBook. Not the MacBook Pro, but the, really small MacBook.
Yeah.
But, it's not exactly going to be a, an apples to apples, pardon the pun, comparison when you do that. So I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see what that actually looks like. You can get 4 gigs or 8 gigs of RAM, 64 or 128, or 256 on storage, which isn't bad. So it goes up to 256. You get a USB-C port. You get a micro SD card. You get a headphone jack. So those are things you're not going to get on a standard tablet. You got a front and rear camera, Dolby speakers, dual front-facing Dolby Audio Premium is what they call it. Starts at $399. So I was kind of thinking this. You remember netbooks?
Gosh, just barely. Yes.
Okay, so netbooks were these crappy little Windows, inexpensive computers that had terrible processors. They were super sluggish and they were kind of small. And at the time, I think Microsoft was betting on these netbooks to kind of be this bridge as consumers were starting to kind of back away from computers. This is probably, 7, 8 years ago, 9, I don't know how long it's been, maybe 10 years ago. We had one, or I bought one for my wife. It was like a $350 little Dell netbook. It was red, so she loved the color. Mm-hmm. But it was so sluggish, it was terrible. It was just not a good machine, and netbooks were plagued with performance issues. And I thought, oh my goodness, Microsoft's reinventing, air quotes, reinventing the netbook and just calling it a Surface Go. I don't think they're necessarily doing that, but we will need to see what all how this thing actually performs in the real world. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt because Microsoft's been making great hardware. I think if they're going to compete against a Chromebook or an inexpensive iPad, they've got to build something on their own, because if you leave, HP and Dell and Lenovo to do this, they're going to build a crappy netbook. So one thing that Microsoft's been successful in doing with building their own hardware is pushing the vendors that support them, like Dell and HP, to build better hardware to go along with it. So I like the direction they're going. Time will tell if this is actually, going to be a hit or not. You have any thoughts on this?
I think it's interesting. I do think the advantage for a lot of people over the iPad is you do get a full operating system. I think the Windows 10 operating system has proved to be really good. And so they're being able to leverage this. They can sell it as a tablet. You can add the keyboard and pen and do some note-taking and sketching. It'll run Microsoft Word. It looks like they're also going to offer an LTE option. And so, yeah, man, I think it's pretty smart. It'll be interesting to see how the market responds to it. My guess is, though, the $399 is not much of a machine. You begin doing some upgrades, and now you're up into the iPad Pro range and probably $700, $800. If you extend your memory, if you get the bigger hard drive, you add the LTE. And so, it'll be interesting to see exactly where it lands and what people buy and how they use them.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm not going to buy one. You going to buy one?
No. No, I'm not. Not gonna buy a Surface Go. But I'd play on one at Best Buy if they had one.
Okay. Well, I'm sure they will. All right, so I think we're done with that one a little bit early. I did not think the Microsoft Surface Go would go all the way 10 minutes, but we made it about 8.5, and I think that's saying something.
That's about all it deserves. All right, so anyways, hey, Keith, man, that brings us to one of the, I think, most talked about portions of our show. I mean, if you had to say it, around the world, and that is the blank check, the fill-in-the-blank check. You have kind of an interesting one, kind of an out-of-the-box one for us this week. I'm excited to hear about it.
All right, so my blank check this week is a book by Alec Ross, and it's called The Industries of the Future. Alec Ross, I did not know who he was before I read the book, and it was recommended by Audible to me. I've read several books that are kind of in and around the same topic.
So first of all, when you say Audible and you listen to a book on Audible, you still say you've read the book?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I'm just checking.
It's weird when I say listen.
Yeah, no, I got
listen
you.
to the book.
I got you.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yes, I still say read because people understand what I mean. Well, I think most people do. Anyway, so Alec Ross, who actually, by the way, right now is running for governor in Maryland. So if you live in Maryland, I don't know if you like Alec Ross, you don't like Alec Ross, but I did like the book. A lot of the book comes from his time spent in the State Department. So he worked in the previous administration's State Department. And of course, he spent lots of time traveling all over the world and meeting, all kinds of people and seeing all different kinds of scenarios and situations. And so the book does a really good job of mapping out what he believes will be the industries of the future. And what he refers to as the future is really just the next 10 years. And that may not seem like very much of the future, but at the rate that we're going, change is happening so quickly that anything I think past 10 years is, I don't think anybody can have a good idea of what 10 years looks like anyway. So the best we can do is say, over the next decade, what do we expect to happen?
Yeah.
And so his travels to over 41 countries or so, he learned all kinds of things. And so some of the industries he refers to, I think, are no surprise, like cybersecurity. I think if you want to have a pretty stable job over the next decade, a job in cybersecurity is probably going to be a good idea, right? Because everything's hacked all the time and attacked all the time. Cybersecurity is one of those. Genomics, which not a lot of people know about, and that is how it's kind of the intersection of technology and biology, and how how the human genome can be manipulated, and that is good for, or can be used for, things like curing diseases. It can also be, used for other not so good things. And so much like artificial intelligence, which is one of these as well, there's the ethical consideration that needs to be taken into account there. So that was a really interesting discussion. Money, digital currency. What does that do to markets around the world? What does that mean for banks? What does that mean for, how people process and possess money? And so when you start changing how money works, then obviously, Ross, you're going to change a lot about how we work, right?
Yes.
So he goes into that. So anyway, there's a whole, a list of these industries of the future. And what I liked about the book, and I'll be honest with you, it's not the most glamorous read. It's pretty to the point. But what I liked about it, Ross, is he does a very good job of giving real world examples from things that he's learned and from countries around the world that are already investing in these technologies and how that is now shaping those industries. So it's a very, the word I would use for it is practical. Is a very practical outline to what these industries are, and backed up by what I considered to be very reasonable arguments. So nothing really controversial in here. You might agree or disagree that something else should have been on the list, or maybe this one's not going to be as important. But I think he does a very good job of articulating why these industries are the industries that will emerge over the next 10 years, and the reasons behind those. The reasons behind those, and what that means for not just the people in those fields, but the world really around us, and how much of a change that we're going to see. So I don't know how much it costs, because my Audible subscription, you get, a couple free books a month. Well, free. You get a couple books a month or whatever. Yeah. So it's probably $14-15 somewhere in there. But Alec Ross, The Industries of the Future, check it out on Audible or Amazon, or if you actually happen to live close to an actual bookstore, maybe go in and buy one.
Hey, that's a great blank check. I mean, I think that's fascinating, The Industries of the Future. Hey, so does he contrast, or does he mention, so if you were to go back the last 10 years, the industries of the last 10 years and versus the industries of the next 10 years?
No, it's mainly forward-looking. Not a lot. Okay. I mean, now he does reference, a lot of the things that he's learned, or that he took away from his time at the State Department. So those obviously are kind of backwards-looking kind of things. Yeah. But it's mainly connecting those things with what is emerging now and why.
Great. All right. Great recommendation. Thanks, Keith. All right. So Ross's fill in the blank check this week. Keith, have you seen The Handmaid's Tale?
I have not. I do not have a Hulu subscription. That's Hulu, right?
It is Hulu.
I don't have a Hulu subscription, so I've heard that it's a good show. But honestly, Ross, I'm completely honest with you. I have no idea what the premise of this show is about, or I don't know anything about it. I've just heard very good things about it. So tell me about it.
Well, so it's based off an old book, and the old, is a kind of a dystopic future. And then there was a movie made a long time ago, and then this is sort of a reboot of that story and a retelling of the deal in the. So IMDb says, set in a dystopic future, a woman is forced to live as a concubine under fundamentalist theocratic dictatorship. And so essentially what happens is it season 1 kind of opens up with the world as it is. There are these crises and plagues that result in infertility, and you have a takeover of the American government, okay, by a radical group that is well-funded, has a great military, and it's sort of an internal, almost like a coup, all right?
Are you sure this is in the future?
Well, yes,
Okay.
Keith, it is in the future.
Okay.
And so they call themselves Gilead. I mean, so this is the new governing. It's like a coup in America. And what they've done is they've restructured life to solve the problem of infertility. And how they've done it is they are essentially, they take these women, they repurpose them, they become these handmaids, and it is all kind of flowered in, all of these good things. But yet underneath what you see is all this oppression and all of the sort of, hey, here's an idea to solve a problem, and how the tyranny continues to grow and grow and grow and grow. So it's a dark show, but it is very fascinating. It stars Elizabeth Moss. And so Elizabeth Moss, most people know her from Mad Men, and then she did this other show, Top of the Lake, which she won, I think, a Golden Globe for, and then Handmaid's Tale, which she also won a Golden Globe for. So she's a great actress. She does an outstanding job, and the story is very compelling. I mean, it's one of those shows you end up binging. Say, I'm just going to watch an episode, and then you end up watching 3 episodes, and can't wait till the next night. You can watch another one. So Leslie and I, my wife, we started the first season together and watched it, and then I just recently caught up on the second series, and I think it's interesting. There is some social commentary in it, no doubt, and I think it's very powerful and poignant. But I think the story is also very fascinating, and it's almost a look back at even the history of the world, because that's what this dystopic society does, is it's very much going backwards in the world. And so you see, anything you might idealize about the good old days, this absolutely shatters that. So I think it's a very, very interesting, very well done story.
Okay, so season 2, let's get 2 full seasons are out, right?
Yeah, 2 full seasons, and I bet Hulu dropped the second season a couple of months ago. So
if I do a free trial, does Hulu have a free trial? I'll look that up. If I do a free trial, do you think I can binge it all?
Yeah, I mean, you just need a good weekend. You could probably binge it all. I mean, you'd get caught up in the story, and you certainly could. And remember, if you go back several episodes, we talked about the very best ways to sign up for those things with your Gmail account. You can change the dot in your Gmail account, or you can add the plus Hulu, or plus Hulu 1, plus Hulu 2. So if you don't, you can just sign up for a new trial with a new email.
Yeah.
I mean, not that I would encourage anybody to do that, but certainly you could.
Got it. Okay. I will add that to my list.
All right. Yeah. So that's my blank check, The Handmaid's Tale. Let me know what you think about it. Well, thanks for listening to Fill in the Blank, where we discuss how the technology of today impacts the world of tomorrow. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, you can find us on Twitter at AskFITB, or email us fitbpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to know what you think of the show. And if you like the show, tell your friends. Also, please rate and review us on iTunes or from wherever it is that you're listening to this podcast. And remember the Fill in the Blank $1 challenge. Your support does go a long way. We'll see you next week again here at Fill in the Blank.